Welcome everyone to episode 141 of Fergo and the Freak. I'm your host, the Glorious League Freak, and I thought that we might as well do an emergency episode, the pandemic episode of Fergo and the Freak. Andrew's not here at the moment, but I have two very special guests. I have Katey, who you all know. Hello, Katey.
Hi.
And
Hi.
I have hello, Katey. Thank you for joining us. And I've got Daniel Pettigrew, who does SWR Sports Radio. Hello, Daniel.
Yeah, just saying to you before we're recording, it's a bit weird you hosting instead of me, but episode 141, I'm very impressed, mate.
Yeah, I was going to say we knock them out like something, but I won't say that.
No, probably not.
Yeah. We don't worry. I reckon the listeners, when they hear me do the intro, they're all like, what the fuck's going on?
I'm sure they're very excited.
Yeah. So anyway, it's been a really weird few days. It probably all kicked off when the NBA decided that they were going to suspend games out of nowhere, and they had a player test positive, Rudy Gobert. They've had Donovan Mitchell also test positive, but I feel like that was the first domino for a lot of things falling into place in terms of sport around the world. We'd already seen Italian soccer. They had been playing behind closed doors, but since the NBA decided to suspend their season, we've seen pretty much every sport except rugby league decide to stop playing. Katey, what have you thought about the last few days in terms of how it's sort of affected your life? And, you know, it's kind of been like a movie, hey?
A little bit, yeah. It hasn't affected my life much because I like to avoid people in general. So I feel like my whole life leading up to this has just been preemptive.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, it just feels like business as usual for me.
Okay. So, Daniel, like you do a lot of radio work. You actually do a lot of flying as well from time to time. What's it been like for you?
Well, it's been interesting. Before we get, obviously, to the NRL and the sporting point of view, from a personal point of view, I grew up in Sydney. I'm a rugby league fan, but currently living in Melbourne, working in Melbourne. But as you pointed out, flying to Sydney quite a lot for rugby league during the rugby league season. And in 2 weeks' time, I was due to fly to Sydney, possibly next week, but definitely in 2 weeks' time to do a game for SWR Sport and also to attend the South Sydney and Sydney Roosters match, which obviously, for many reasons, as you know, is always a grudge match. And for so more so because it's been built up all off-season with Latrell Mitchell joining the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Now, from a work point of view, I've worked in the media, mate, for probably 10 or 11 years. I've seen big stories. I've not seen a story just in the whole basic of the world, not even to do with sport, move as fast as this. 3 or 4 days ago, we were nowhere near where we are now in terms of suspending our major two football codes in this country, in the NRL and the AFL, all playing them behind closed doors. I was at work on Friday night, and I was there for about 6 hours. They're quarantining, they're putting in isolation. They're putting the big presenters from all different radio stations in quarantine as of Monday, so they don't affect it. And the worry from listeners is I've never seen anything like it. Now, I've had my personal opinions whether this is an overreaction or not. I don't know. But obviously, we've got to keep the vulnerable people in our community safe. So I agree with the fact that we might have to change things around a bit. And, mate, from a personal point of view, I mean, we can't see into the future, but I'm supposed to be in Sydney in 2 weeks. I don't know whether I'm going to get on that plane. I don't know whether I should. It's just left everything up in the air for everyone, I reckon.
Yeah, and like I know that we've been aiming to get together for the commentary that we do for the Canterbury Cup. And I know, like, we talked last week a little bit about what we were going to do. And it was funny because I messaged you early last week saying, is there any plans in place? And you're like, we're just going to wait and see for now. And then what was it, Thursday that we had our phone call and it had changed so much since then. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, well, we had a discussion, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, and I know you messaged me. You messaged me, I think, at the beginning of last week, so, you know, about 10 days ago and said, what does the station have in place, the station where we call Rugby League? And at that stage, there'd been a few cases in Australia, but nothing overly to be concerned about. And we didn't have anything in place as far as I know. And then when we spoke on the phone, I rang, and I'm not going to go into details, but I rang someone in the New South Wales Rugby League who said it's a wait-and-see situation. And on that day, it really was a wait-and-see situation, especially from the New South Wales Rugby League, but more so from the NRL. This has escalated more so in the past 72 hours since there's been more cases in Australia. And I think also, and this is a complete different thing and probably something we shouldn't go into, but I also think we're struggling a bit because no one really knows what's going on because of the lack of leadership. We've seen what New Zealand has done in the last 24 hours, and I know this impacts the NRL, and that is a different subject, but they've put in place that everyone coming back into the country needs to be self-isolated for 14 days. I'm not entirely sure whether you think this is over, if you think this needs to be done or not is a separate thing, but I'm not entirely sure why Australia aren't doing that. Why we had to wait when Scott Morrison came out on Friday and said, we have to avoid gatherings of 500 or more, but you can wait until Monday to do that. It just doesn't make sense to me. I'm kind of surprised we were playing in front of crowds this week, even though it's great, because it puts the NRL players and anyone playing professional sport at risk. It's just a very mixed message here in Australia.
Yeah, that was a bit weird. It's Katey, what do you think about, like, when you are out in public, are you thinking about this? Like, do you find yourself, when you see someone coughing or sneezing or something, are you super vigilant about it? Because I know I have been.
I am all the time, actually, because I have lupus, so I'm immunocompromised on the regular. So it's something that I always pay a lot of attention to.
Mm-hmm. Would you say you got decent price ticket, or say you got free tickets to a footy game, so at Parramatta Stadium or something? Would you go?
I've been offered members tickets to Parramatta Stadium on the regular, and I don't go.
Okay.
Because I avoid people as much as I can because they're disease carriers at the best of times.
Especially Parramatta fans, they're just a bunch of dirty, pandemic waiting to happen is the best of times.
You just never know what people are going to do or have, and I am around people all week at work.
Mm-hmm.
And so on the weekends, I just don't want anything to do with them.
But Katey makes a good point here in the fact that, yes, this coronavirus is awful, but I'm kind of hoping that once we're past this, and we don't know when we pass this in terms of society, but I'm hoping that the whole washing of hands and hand sanitizer sort of is almost made a regular daily basis. Now, washing your hands should always be like that, but I've seen people, washing their hands, even if they've not done anything, but just washing their hands before they eat, even if they've just been sitting there for an hour. I think hygiene, and like Katey said, you get on public transport at the moment, someone's coughing. Now, there's a 99% chance nothing's wrong with them, but you kind of look up and you kind of worry about it. And I've even seen in reports today that potentially, if it gets worse, we could be getting on trains where we are only able to sit one passenger per 2 seats or one passenger per 4 seats, depending what train or bus or whatever mode of transport you're in. So it is just quite unbelievable the times we're living in.
Sorry, Katey, were we going to say something?
Oh, I was just thinking about the fact that people just are very thoughtless with it. Like, our bakery is about 4 shops down from a doctor's surgery. Mm-hmm. And the other week, a lady comes in, she's like, you should wash your hands after you serve me because I have shingles.
Oh.
And I'm like, if you've got shingles, why are you coming into a bakery?
Mm-hmm.
Go home.
Yeah, I know personally, like when I've been out, it doesn't matter where I've been, if I've been to the footy, if I've just been to the local shop, whatever, I come in, I'll wash my hands. I tend to do that. And I tend to wash my hands before I'm making something to eat and things like that. And it's weird because you sort of think to yourself, is that over the top normally? And I've at times I've thought, like, maybe it is, but I'm comfortable in doing that. It's not affecting anyone else. I wash my hands a few more times than most people. And when it's coming to what the authorities are saying now, like, my routine hasn't basically changed at all, because what they're saying, I kind of do all the time anyway. But yeah, it really does bring into it's like you say, Katey, like, you see somebody, the thing I can never get is when somebody walks into a pharmacy and they're eating food. It's like, what the fuck are you doing? You're going to
people
catch
let their kids play on the floor at the doctor's or the hospital.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's like people bleed on that floor and vomit and like, what are you doing?
Look, it probably is. Like, generally speaking, I applaud you. I think it's a great idea to do that. Look, you've known me for a while. Last year, we were at Campbelltown in September of last year, and I turned up with tonsillitis. Now, I would usually just say a member of my team not to come in, and we've had that discussion, as you know, over the past week, and I've actually just sent a message out recently asking, look, if the season is to go ahead, or we don't know where we're at with that at the moment, I'm leaving it up completely to the members of the commentary team to turn up. But if one of them presents with a cold, or I present with a cold, like anyone could get this, even if it's not coronavirus, it's just not worth the risk of continuing when hopefully in a month we can sort of push past this. I think the important thing, and I know we'll get onto the sport ramifications in a minute, but I think the real important thing, and from people that know a lot more about this than us, the next 2 weeks is crucial in this country. You've seen what's happened in Italy over the past week now. I think last night 250 people died yesterday in Italy because they just cannot cope with everything that's going on. So regardless of all the sport, and we love our sport, but it's so important, I think, these next 2 weeks to get what they say, the curve in inverted commas downwards. And the other thing I think people forget, guys, is that we're heading into our winter. Now, over in the UK, over in Italy, over in Europe, obviously, they're heading into their summer. Now, obviously, there's jokes made about how hot it actually does get over there, but it is going to be warmer over there. Whereas here, we've got to deal with this. We're also going to have to deal with the ordinary flu that's going around. And just because of the kind of weather, I can tell you here in Melbourne, yesterday was 30 degrees. Today was about 16 degrees. I know it was similar in Sydney with the weather. People are going to get general colds as well. So there's got to be some kind of advice there on what people have to do. This is why, for so many reasons, the next 2 or 3 weeks is absolutely crucial in the context of how this whole story plays out.
Definitely. And look, I think that I wouldn't be shocked if by tomorrow night or the Sunday night, this will be when people are listening to this, that they'll have, at least in the big cities, closed down the schools for the week because, and I know that there's a lot of arguments against it. There was arguments against it in that people that work in the medical profession, they can't afford to now be off of work and stay at home and look after their kids that are in school. But I feel as though that in Australia we're a little bit lucky in that we're very isolated and we're a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of where our numbers are at with the infection rate and, like how we're able to isolate people and stuff. And I think that as a country, I just wouldn't be shocked if the government decided over the next 48 hours that if we look to isolate people to a severe degree, we're going to be able to slow the infection rate to a point where our hospital systems and our doctors and that aren't overwhelmed, because that's really all they're trying to stop with this isolation stuff. It's not so much stopping everyone getting it or most people getting it, because they tend to think that most people, like 70%, I think they said we're going to get it. But it's everyone getting it all at once that's the problem, because they just can't treat everyone at once.
And the other thing is also people getting the flu at the same time as this virus, which is why they're encouraging people when it is time to get the flu shot, which is very soon. You mentioned schools. I know names, but I know a school teacher who has basically pleaded with the principal and higher up people to close the school now. The other thing that people are kind of forgetting, if you're not involved in the education world, which I am not, but what people are forgetting is we're 2 weeks away from school holidays, 3 maybe in some states. Just take them off. Obviously, the Easter show's been cancelled and that's sad. But, if you're going to take time off for 4 weeks to look after your kids, to save them from getting sick and save yourself from getting sick, is that the end of the world? Yes, I know the economy is important. I know we still need to go out. But there's nothing to say you can stop. There's nothing not to say that if you stop schools, you still can't go out to the shops. You still can't, if you're 18 or over, go out for a drink. They're not saying you can't go out, but I think there has to be a lot of precautions about, I know they say 500, but I reckon any mass gatherings and staying in one isolated spot. But to be honest, and I love the old guys' point of views on this, the whole public transport system, I know we talked about this, you know, they say, and the chief health officer, who knows a lot more than us, say that it's more if you're in a static environment for more than 2 or 3 hours. But the argument I've heard from sports fans, I think it's a fairly valid one. You know, you go to watch the Roosters play Penrith or whatever last night. You know, you go to any sporting game, you go to the AFL. Are you just as likely to catch it there as you are? You're probably more likely to catch it on public transport. So when does it come a time where we shut down public transport and tell everyone, basically, apart from maybe supermarkets and chemists, to stay in the house?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's weird because we can't really shut everything down.
No. And people still have to work.
Yeah, and like, I mean, in Italy they have done, but it's funny. It's a very, very different country to what we have in Australia. And I think that we're seeing that with how, you know, it hitting the US and their hospital system and all that. It's very different to what we have. I think we're probably more in line with what they've got in the UK and Canada in terms of like our system of government, obviously, but also just our general society and how it's set up. The UK is really struggling with it at the moment. They've got a lot of issues there. Look, I think it comes down to the individual. Like Katey, you've got kids, and they've been saying that children tend to be carriers if they get it, they're not really affected by it. Thankfully, like touch wood, it's fantastic that it's that case. But are you sort of at the point where you're starting to think about, you know, do you send your kids to school? Do you keep them back? Are you able to keep them back? Like, what are your thoughts there?
I haven't really thought about it so much, just because I've been so busy, and I know that I get sick so easily. So if there was someone near me that has coronavirus, I would have it. Because I catch everything. I've had staph. I've had chickenpox 4 times. I've had all types of illnesses, so I know that I'll get sick. But if they said to me, you have to keep your kids home, I'm keeping my kids home.
Yeah.
Are you choosing to keep your kids home at the moment?
Not at the moment, no. But if I hear about someone close by that has coronavirus, I might. But I'm a bit more full on with that kind of stuff than my husband. He's kind of like the type of person who's like, okay, your arm got chopped off, you'll be right. So we've got to find that balance. And I'm at work all day. He's the one at home, so he's kind of the one that makes that choice there because he's the one dealing with it, not me. But I mean, I think there's people that work that need to go to work, but there's people that don't work that don't need to send their kids to school. And if people who don't work that don't need to send their kids to school could take one for the team and keep their kids at home so that it lessens the risk of diseases spreading at school because there's less kids at school, that'd be nice.
Yeah, and you know what? This is not going to be a forever thing. It's awful at the moment we're in, but it's not going to go. Look, this virus might be around forever, but they're obviously working on a vaccine. And, you know, in a year's, well, probably less than a year's time, in 6 months, this will all be very different. But right now, we've got to protect as many people as possible.
Yeah, and do whatever it takes to a certain extent. I mean, look, if it was up to me, we would go straight to the extreme measures and try and stop it in its tracks. But I understand that's not practical. And I also am looking at it from a point of view of somebody that could do that and it not affect me as much as it would affect a lot of other people. I just worry if we don't take them steps now that we will have to do them anyway.
I think we should be doing them now. Honestly, I just don't see why we're waiting.
I tend to agree. 3 nights ago, I'm lying in bed, right? my
Do
head.
we want to know this?
Yeah, lying in bed, just thinking, what should I do now? I'm like chucked on some AMSR. So my head started feeling a bit funny. I had a bit of a tingle in the back of my throat, and my nose was a little bit runny. And I was lying there, and I'm thinking, I got it. I've got it. I've definitely got it. Right?
This is it. I'm
Yeah,
dying.
this is it. Yeah. And look, I'm pretty good at the moment. But I thought I had it, and I thought I'm either going to wake up and I'm going to be really sick. I'm going to wake up and it's just because I've had the air conditioner on today. And it turned out it was probably just the air conditioner. Have you both had those moments in the last few days?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I have those moments all the time. As soon as I get any type of sniffle, I'm like, this is it. I'm done. But I got the flu a few years ago. And you know how people get a cold and they're like, oh, I've got the flu. Like, no, bitch. You will know when you've got the flu.
Yeah, I'm with Katey. I haven't had the flu as such over the past couple of years, but I've had, as you know, bouts of tonsillitis, and I had one really bad in 2018, which, to be perfectly honest, and it probably gets the example a lesser example, obviously, but what the NRL is trying to do and AFL is trying to do at the moment is protect everyone from this. I had a bout of tonsillitis in 2018. I still turned up to call a game of rugby league. I then went to a Roosters game. Now, if that was now and you had this virus, that would be very much frowned upon, putting it nicely. And as you know, I had it last year. The past couple of days, and it hasn't been anything proper, I don't think, but I've woken up in the middle of the night with a tiny sore throat, and I go back to sleep, and I'm fine. But also, like, from what I do, calling rugby league, even though that's probably on hold for a little bit, I'm a bit like Katey. Every time you get a little tickle, every time you get a bit of a cold, you worry. And I think, and this is not an attack at the media, but I think because it's in the news so much, as it has to be, rightfully so, I think it's kind of making some people kind of paranoid as well. And the other thing, the weather is changing. In Sydney and Melbourne and other parts of Australia, not so much in the hotter parts of Australia, the weather is going from hot to cold, and people do tend to get sick at this time of the year anyway. So you kind of add that into the equation, where there will be a lot of people that just are just around having normal colds who have rang the whatever hotline, who have rang everyone just to make sure they are okay as well.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up the media because, you work in the media, right? And the three of us were all like commentary superstars, obviously podcasting superstars. Our voice is I like to say that my voice is my organ, and I like to look after my organ. But I know that what day was it? I think it was the Thursday. It was the Thursday. I basically watched all day. That was the day that they cancelled the Grand Prix. Was it Thursday or Friday?
Friday.
So Friday, I was watching the news ABC before they'd cancelled the Grand Prix. And so I watched the news all day. It was on in the background from the morning. And it was interesting because there was a lot of press conferences and things like that. And then it gets to, and I thought it was very informative. It was very good. And then it gets to 6 o'clock, and I had Channel 7 News on. It gets to 6 o'clock, and there was a change. And all of a sudden, it started like being tabloid stuff. And I'm like, this is weird. And it gets to 7 o'clock, and I flick over because the footy's coming on. I flick to Channel 9, and ACA is on for half an hour. Well, that was just fucking nutty. There's some of the stuff they had on ACA. It was crazy.
Yeah, look, I'll be careful what I say because I'm employed by Channel 9. But look, I was like you on Friday. I was I woke up. So I was working, and I've been interested to hear Katey's thoughts on this because obviously she would have been watching and listening as we all were. But I was working on Thursday night at 3AW. Well, maybe you weren't. But I was working. You might have been one of the smart ones in avoiding it. But look, I was working at 3AW in Melbourne on Thursday night, which is the equivalent of 2GB, probably a bit of a lesser, more common sense type of station. But, you know, you could argue otherwise. But look, on Thursday night, I was at work, and I think it came through at about 10 p.m. that night that I think the McLaren team had pulled out of the F1. And there was a lot of talk around the station then about whether this would go ahead or not go ahead. Anyway, I finished up at midnight, got home, and I know about 1 a.m., went to sleep quite quickly after that. And I woke up in the middle of the night, and it was interesting because I get notifications about news, especially with this on my phone quite a lot, and it had said F1 called off, and I had to look at it. I thought, okay, all right, I'll go back to sleep. Then you wake up a few hours later, and the whole shambles of however many people waiting at the gates after Daniel Andrews, the Victorian Premier, said it's definitely not going ahead, at least without crowds. And then they decided, 2 hours later, that it wasn't going ahead. The crowds weren't told for an hour and a half later. And then the news all day, whether it be TV or radio, I think did a very, very good job at reporting everything. I didn't watch a current affair. I didn't see a lot of what was going on in there, and whether it be Channel 9 or Channel 7 News. But I think radio kept a level head with everything. And it's quite interesting now that both 2GB and 3AW presenters are going into isolation for the next forever how long, just to make sure they're okay and they can keep presenters up to date. I think the media plays a big role in this. I know some people say they're panicking people, and I get that. But at the end of the day, if they ignored it and ignored what was going on, more so probably overseas than here, there's a lot more happening overseas than here at the moment, and hopefully that stays the same. Obviously, we want to get better overseas, but we don't want it to get worse here. They've got to report it, because if they didn't, they would ignore it. It's just been a very surreal couple of days, and I think, personally, I hope this doesn't go on for months, but I think we're going to have another surreal couple of weeks before this might just hopefully start to calm down a little.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's going to be at least a month and a half of weirdness just in life and generally, getting out of your own routines and changing your habits. And look, for me, the thing has been, if I don't desperately need to go and do something or get something, then don't go and get it. Don't leave the house if you don't have to. It was weird. What day was it? I think it was Thursday. Might have been Friday. No, it was Thursday. I went to the chemist just to pick up just general supplies. It was like I needed mouthwash. I wanted to get some Panadol, just stuff like that.
Yes.
And let me tell you something. There is nothing more frantic than two obvious meth head women running around a chemist trying to get bargains on shelves and stuff, and coming back and going and coming back. It was the craziest. Like, I think I said I messaged Julie when I got back. I said, man, if you could get one of these women, they would make 70 tackles in a rugby league game. They had so much energy. I was really actually quite impressed. Okay, so let's go to rugby league now. What it's looking like is that we'll play this round in front of crowds. The crowds haven't been great, obviously. And then from next round, we will be playing in front of no crowds. There is talk that we will be playing in just a couple of different venues. The New Zealand Warriors will be based in Australia during this time until, you don't know. We don't know what's happening. It's changing so quick. But that seems to be the plan so far. What do you think of this plan, Katey? And do you think that the NRL has done the right thing, or do you think that they could have done better?
Oh, geez, I don't know. I mean, I'm sending my kids to school. I'm still going to work, so I don't know what's a good thing to do. Mm-hmm. Imagine being the guy who has to make those decisions.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't want to be the person making those decisions, because someone's going to be unhappy. I mean, the guy blinks and someone's unhappy.
Yeah, true. And
so imagine having all these people's health in your hands. Then you shut it down and everyone wants their money back. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and look, I've been talking to people that work at clubs behind the scenes, and they've been saying per locked out game, they're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars, because it is like corporate boxes, it is just general turn up, ticket buying tickets and stuff. They're getting calls from season ticket holders that what do they do? Do they want a refund? They're freaking out. And yeah, there's a lot going on there. I tend to think what will happen, and I think the NRL announced that they'll have an emergency fund for clubs because they know they're going to lose. I mean, the clubs across the league are going to lose millions and millions of dollars.
Well,
sorry, go on.
No, well, I heard that, presuming there are no crowds next weekend, which is 99.9% likely, I think the Broncos are losing $1 million. I think even the Roosters, and like, laugh about the Roosters, whatever, but I think even for that game at the Central Coast, which they have been promoting for months now, they're going to lose $700,000. Now, teams like the Roosters and the Broncos can probably afford it, but I worry, I've got a big long tangent I'll go on when you let me, mate, but I worry for clubs how long this goes on for, whether we play games or not play games or whatever. This is a big, obviously the world and the health is a much bigger issue, but this is a huge issue for our game. We're not in the position the AFL and the EPL and various other sports are around the world.
See, I think that we're in an all right spot, and I'll tell you why. Because there's a lot of the clauses in a lot of the contracts, and look, the NBA is looking at this. The NBA Players Association is looking at this. A lot of the clauses in the contracts say that broadcasters, basically, there's a point where they can cut back on how much they're giving to a sport in a year, depending on how few games or how many games are cut out of the schedule. So obviously, Channel 9 is not going to say, like, you've taken 2 weeks off, we're going to cut it by 50%, but they will take a percentage out because we're not giving them the product that we said we would. And I think that will have a flow-on effect to players as well. And I'm sure it would be part of the collective bargaining agreement that if games stop being played, the players will be paid less. Now, I don't think that they're going to shortchange the players and say you're not getting any money, but they will get a much lower percentage of the money because it's just no one's doing their job. No one's earning the money. And so I think that rugby league, it's not going to be good for any sport at all. But I think rugby league's in a better position in terms of when things start up again, it is still the number one TV sport in Australia. Like, I'd be way more worried if I was, say, soccer or rugby union, so maybe one of these sports that don't have the momentum, because it's going to be, rugby union is in a real bad place right now. They've had to cancel their Super Rugby competition. They're probably going to struggle to get international teams to and from Australia. They're in a real bad place. And on top of that, the TV ratings are really low. I think rugby league, there was a lot of doomsday merchants out today. And I can't understand
Oh, was there? I didn't notice.
It was crazy, wasn't it? But I think there was a lot of speculation about this will kill rugby league, and I just don't think that's the case. I think it'll be really hurtful, and when it all starts up again, rugby league will be back into it.
But see, I agree with all of that. I think, look, AFL, as much as I don't want to admit it, is obviously the number one football code in this country. But the one thing that people conveniently forget with AFL, not everyone, but a lot of people, is that, as you said, rugby league is a TV game. So, look, the fact that crowds can't go, and as far as we know, like, when we recorded this podcast, obviously the NRL is having a press conference at the time of the recording in about 10 hours' time, so we will know more then, obviously. But the AFL are planning to go ahead behind closed doors. I totally understand why they're doing that, but it will hit them more because they get crowds of 80, 90,000. That game, Richmond and Carlton on Thursday, would have got 90,000 people. We're not going to get that. Let's be realistic. We don't even get that for a grand final. But rugby league is more of a TV game, and I've seen a lot of panic merchants, and it's in society at the moment, on Twitter and social media today saying, oh, look, the season might be cancelled. Look, there is, I'm not going to lie, there is a small possibility that the season may be cancelled. If this goes on for months and one of our players gets coronavirus and everyone goes in quarantine, the season will probably be postponed, then yes, it may well be cancelled. That is worst case scenario. I think the NRL, and look, I applaud, and I know he's got his critics. I think Todd Greenberg has done a very good job on this, along with Peter V'landys, in the fact that they're trying to push through as long as they can. Personally, I think it's inevitable at some point we're going to postpone the season, whether that be this week or in a few weeks' time. But there is the off chance that this story could die down, and the Australian government can get on top of this, and we can isolate teams up in Darwin or Townsville or wherever they choose to go. And in a month's time, maybe this story will go back to normal. There is the other possibility, and I don't like mentioning this because I think the Kangaroo Tour is very, very important. But say we get to a position where we play round 2, potentially round 3, and then, one of our players gets the virus. Hopefully they're fine, but obviously they have to go into quarantine. There is the option. Obviously, we have 2 or 3 weeks up our sleeves with Origin and rep rounds and potentially playing midweek games. But I'm sure one of the options that is being discussed at the moment is maybe we just have to cancel the Kangaroo Tour now. I don't want that to happen, but I think it would please more people for the NRL to be played, even if we played until the end of October or into early November. It's not really going to hurt anyone because at the end of the day, we're still going to get a 3 or 4 month off season. There are a lot of ways the NRL can get around this. Personally, the people I feel most sorry for, and if the NRL does go along with this plan, and I think it's a radical plan, the Warriors.
How bad is it? Did you see Adam Blair's wife?
I haven't seen that, but I know Peter Hicker's wife is expecting a kid next week.
Sorry for them, all of them being like, if their husbands get sick, they're in a different freaking country. Like
the problem is, though, I think Yvonne Sampson made this point on the coverage last night, that if they do go home, is that they're probably going to have to be self-isolated anyway for 14 days. So it's kind of it's a lose-lose situation. We are in unprecedented times. And I posted something on Twitter the other day, and I got a bit of flack from it, but I think the NRL's idea, and look, the NRL has its critics, but I think the NRL's idea to go forward as long as possible, and look, we are delaying what is probably going to be inevitable. But if we can get another couple of rounds out, get to round 3 or round 4, and then, if we have to postpone the season for a few weeks, it's not going to be the end of the world. The other thing is, it's probably not going to be long until the Australian government does exactly what the New Zealand government has done as well. And League Freak, you know more than me. The Toronto Wolfpack based themselves in, I think, the UK for half the year. I know a Japanese rugby club, rugby union club, is based themselves, the Sunwolves, I think, in Australia for the past month. It's not a good situation. I feel sorry for the Warriors off the field. I think on the field they're a bit of a basket case. But look, this is not normal. This is not going to be an every year thing. But for now, if we want the game to go together, everyone has to unite as one. All the clubs just have to say, this is it for the next month. Let's just go forward and hope for the best.
Yeah, I think what they'll do with the Warriors, I think they'll sit everyone at the club, they'll sit them down. And the first thing is, look, I am guessing that their Canterbury Cup team played or is going to play in Australia this week.
Yeah, so they played, or they are going to play, but the issue with them is a lot of them are on part-time contracts.
Okay, so let me tell you what I think is going to happen, right? I think that they'll sit, and the NRL will do it. They'll get everyone, probably not in a room. They'll probably do it via TV, Skype, probably. They will say, look, this is our plan: is to keep you in Australia. We'll put you in a good place. We will make sure that you're safe as we can possibly make you from the virus. I think the Warriors will be looked after by the NRL if they have to stay in Australia. I also think they'll say, if anybody wants to go home and do the 2-week quarantine, you just tell us now. And that'll be look, if it's the whole team wants to go home, there's nothing the NRL can do about it. That I don't know if they look to reschedule the Warriors games or if the Warriors forfeit the games or whatever.
I don't know why they can't reschedule them. They can take it from, put their games back, and whoever their team's playing, just shuffle it, make it work.
I agree with Katey. The only issue I think in that is that then we have an uneven, for however long this goes on, for hopefully a few weeks, an uneven competition where you've got look, I think it should be up to the individual players. Personally, I don't think it should be Stephen Kearney or the Warriors CEO or Todd Greenberg making the decision. If someone like a Peter Hickery wants to go home and support his wife, I have no issue with that. I think there will be a lot of players that will choose to stay because at the end, this is their living, this is their life. And I don't know. They may well, a lot of them might be single, who knows? But there will be a lot of them with families as well. But the problem is if we don't have a Warrior side in this competition, and yes, they can make up games, but the problem with that to me is that we're going to have 15 teams in the competition. That is fine. But then we've got a team that won't play each week, which is one issue. And then let's say this whole issue does vanish in the next couple of months. You then have teams, not the Warriors, but other teams, or actually the Warriors too, that are going to have to play multiple games a week. And I think that's the issue. But to me, it kind of sounded like the competition is going on regardless of what the Warriors decide to do, which is kind of a worry. But I can kind of understand that point of view as well.
I wonder if there's... And man, it would be an extreme. Look, I think that there's a couple of ways the overall season can go. Number one, they're going to play it as long as possible, and if it does eventually have to get shut down, they look at how many games we've played, and just try and patch together a season after that. And it might only be a 16-game season or something. They might be able to get it so that they play each other once overall. I think that's one option. I think number two, if they have to stop the season maybe after this round, I wouldn't be shocked if in a couple of months' time they restarted it when everything settled down a little bit. But we do, once again, have a condensed season where everyone plays everyone once. The only other options I can see from there is that, as you say, extend the season. So if we miss a month and a half of football, we tack that onto the end of the normal regular season that we would have had, and we end up playing the grand final in maybe November or something. Or the other alternative, if the Warriors are the only team that can't be involved in it, and look, it would be really difficult to see a club or the other 15 clubs agreeing to this. Do you have the Warriors basically not be part of the competition this year, or do you put them straight in as the 8th team in the finals?
I can't. I'd love to hear Kate. I can't have them as the 8th team in the finals if they haven't played. I get where you're coming from, but no, that's unfair to the teams that have played and a 9th team who might miss the finals. I can't see that happening. I think all the other options, but I can't see that happening.
What do you reckon, Katey?
I reckon that as hard as it is to say, and it's not their fault, it's no one's fault, but if I don't go to work, I'm not getting paid. Our shop's not opening. It's not getting done. Bills aren't getting paid. So it's just the way life is.
Yeah.
And that's life.
Sorry, Katey. You know the other thing about all of this is that we saw that Penrith Roosters game last night. Now, it wasn't a huge crowd. I don't know how many people were there. Let's say 12, 13,000. I don't even know if a crowd was announced.
By the way, we won the World Club Championship in that game, so it'd be nice if you gave us the trophy.
Yeah. 3P. Well, but maybe not. Maybe 3P next year. But seriously, though, you look at that game, the Roosters got off to a good start, and, as a Roosters fan, I'm not overly worried about the result. But the Penrith crowd got the Panthers were good.
That's nice to be able to have that.
But the Panthers crowd got them back in that match. How, from my point of view, and this is the thing, I'm not happy about this because I love going to watch my team play. But I understand there's a lot more going on in the world, and I would rather some rugby league than no rugby league. But how do the players react? Let's say round 2 goes ahead, and it's a big if at the moment. I mean, and I don't think even if the NRL come out and say this is going to happen, a lot can change in 4 days. Look, in the past 2 days, we've had Bronchen, Cherry, and Angus Crichton both tested for this virus. Thankfully, both have come back negative. So we've got to get through the next 4 or 5 days anyway. But how do the fans react to playing in front of no crowds? It's going to be very weird. I mean, I know there can be some jokes about some teams not getting a lot of crowds anyway, but seriously, no one in the ground apart from staff and potentially some media personnel, it's going to be weird.
They just put that fake applause in it, like they had on those old TV shows. They just give them fake shit over the speakers.
Imagine if that's what they use the applause for, The Price is Right from 1982.
Yeah, like that.
They just need someone riding the levels, and then when a break is made, they turn up, and when someone drops a ball, there's fake boos and stuff like that.
Or one of their dads are on the sideline screaming at them and take them back to junior league days.
You know, the other thing I read today, and I don't think this will happen, I think it's a pretty stupid idea, but I saw in what we printed in the Sunday Telegraph that clubs are considering, it's a fairly far-fetched idea, but considering selling 499 premium tickets to go and watch their teams play. Now, the reason I think that is a fairly far-fetched idea is I don't think a lot of these games are going to be based in Sydney anyway. I think they have to move out of Sydney. New South Wales is a hotbed at the moment, the hotbed for this virus. Every other state seems to be containing it to some degree. But can you imagine 499 people turning up to a game? That is apparently not considered a mass gathering at the moment. So that's another option, but I consider that to be very far-fetched.
But I would take exception if I were a member, which I'm not because I don't ever plan to go to games. But if I were a member and they started selling off tickets, I'd be like, well, why can't you like randomly choose members if you're going to do something like that that have already paid instead of selling premium tickets off?
That's a great point.
Just give the members, like, pick however many each game. Like, and once you've been chosen once, you don't get chosen again because you've been to one. Everyone has to just sacrifice.
What do you guys make of people, and there's been a lot of argument, I've copped a bit of a piece on Twitter tonight about the fact that there are some people already starting to complain in both NRL and AFL circles about wanting a refund for their membership. I understand it, but personally speaking, and I say this in the extent that I think there will be some sort of season this year. If the whole season is cancelled, I do understand that. Mm-hmm. But if you're missing out on a few games, you've obviously kind of got the money to spend on your team. And all these 16 clubs, I don't care if they're the Roosters down to the Sharks, everyone is going to take a hit on this. I would not be asking for a refund unless the whole season is cancelled. Then maybe get a discount even on next year. But I just think the idea of getting a refund back once you've paid for your membership in a case that is not the team's fault, I think it's just a bit silly.
What do you reckon, Katey? And then I'll say what I think.
What does membership entail? Because I'm not a member of anything. Like, when you pay, what happens?
I think it's different levels. I can only speak from the Roosters, and I'm a season ticket holder of the Sydney Roosters, which in a normal year, obviously we've sort of got the other issue with the football stadium being redeveloped, but what the Roosters would usually have 12 home games. They usually take one, as they are or were going to next week to the Central Coast, and I think they've got one in Perth this year at this stage that will still be going ahead, but who knows. And you do have to pay, I don't know about other clubs, you do have to pay the extra on top of that to go to the Central Coast or go to Perth, which I think is a bit silly, and I think people that have brought tickets to go to the Central Coast next weekend, presuming that doesn't go ahead, probably are entitled to a refund.
Yeah.
But look, I think the Roosters charge, and don't quote, but $220, $240, and you get in for the whole season. You also get membership benefits and stuff like that, and it saves you from queuing up in the GA line or whatever. And at the end of the day, I think in the long run, it saves you, especially if your team plays 12 games at their home ground, wherever that may be. I think it saves you basically 2 games in the whole season.
Well, maybe they could refund something like that. They could refund that as a good faith, because it's not like they're planning to cancel it and never do anything again. They're not saying season's cancelled, fuck you. Like,
no. Look, I think, and I think clubs will look. I think if this season gets cancelled, I think clubs will have no choice but to look at that. If teams miss 2 or 3 home games, then obviously people are allowed to choose what they want to do. I just think it's a bit harsh to ask people to, refund money when these teams are going to take a big hit. But I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, like Freak. You seem to. I'm interested in what you're going to say.
Are you a member?
I'm not a member. I had season tickets for 2 years for the Panthers. About what would that have been? Man, that's weird. It's going back about 5 years now when I think about it. And I think at the time it was, I can't remember how many games it was, but it was about $240. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I did see a tweet by Phil Gould, and he was saying, look, the clubs need your money and stuff like that. And Daniel will know the way I kind of look at it. The way I look at it is these are organisations that generate millions of dollars a year, and I kind of need my money more than they need my money. So if I thought I was going to miss more than, say, 3 games, I would want a full refund. But I could also see if the club said to supporters, look, we understand you just want refunds. We don't know where we're at right now with how many games we can provide you. What we will do is we won't have any refunds until such time as we can tell you how many games you'll be without. And then what we will offer is either a full refund, no questions asked, or we will offer you the partial refund for how many games you will not have been allowed to attend, and the rest of your season ticket will be basically as is going forward. Because right now, I mean, if there's only 2 weeks that they play without fans, it'd be hard to give out complete refunds.
Wouldn't you just credit it for next year?
Look, you could
do that.
You could do that, yeah, but I mean, where are you going to be in 12 months' time? I mean, it's
at home.
Who knows where anyone's going to be?
Because I got asked to buy a membership, and I was like, nah, I'm not going. See, I'm a prophet. I knew this shit was coming. I was like, nope. You can keep all your germy football stadiums to yourselves.
You've been waiting for this pandemic all your life. That's why you've not been going to games, hey?
But you know what? I don't prepare for anything. My sister is a hoarder. She admitted, she came out and she's like, I'm a panic buyer. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what? She showed me. She took photos. She had like 40 packs of toilet rolls plus canned food. She had enough dog food for 40 years. I'm like, are you feeding the whole freaking puppy shelter? For God's sake, what are you doing? Like, you're not even going to have the dog for long enough to feed it all that.
Well, the way I see it in a pandemic, if you've got a dog, man, that's backup protein.
Yeah. My dog's a dog. I don't prepare. I don't know. Maybe I just don't take it seriously enough, but I don't watch the news. I don't talk to anyone about it. I talked to my doctor. He said, I've sent a letter out. If you have flu-like symptoms, you've got to ring before you come. You can't come in to book an appointment. If you've got flu-like symptoms, you're not coming to my office. Go straight to get tested. That's it.
You know what's funny, though? There's a lot of I want to ask you guys a question about the NRL in a second, but there's a lot of people that are not going to the doctor at the moment because they're scared they're going to get this virus, which is probably now, if you've got any issues, great time to go to the doctor. I'd like to know, obviously we're in a situation where we don't know, at the time obviously doing this podcast, we don't know what's going to happen. The likelihood, all reports that have been across the media, is that they're going to try and push on. Do we think it's inevitable that this season is going to be interrupted at some point? I personally think it's going to take a miracle and hopefully it doesn't happen, but I think it's going to take a miracle for one of our players not to get tested positive with coronavirus. But
when they're getting all up in other people's genitals and stuff, random girls. Like,
well, yes.
Like, if you're getting that close to random people when there's a pandemic going on, you're going to get sick.
Well, the other thing is, all 16 clubs in one place, I know they'll be told to basically go to training, go to the game, stay in the hotel. How often do NRL players listen to advice, though? That's my kind of worry. But, the other thing, though, is that let's say someone gets tested positive for coronavirus. So then you've obviously got to quarantine that team for 14 days. And you've got to quarantine more than likely the team that they played against, although I think that's a bit up in the air at the moment as well, because we saw Peter Dunn get diagnosed with coronavirus, 2 days ago, but they said anyone other than who was near him in the 24 hours beforehand don't have to worry about it. So that is kind of a weird one as well, because that's kind of against everything else I've heard about this virus.
That's crazy rich person virus, not poor people virus where we don't have to go to work and not get paid. He's going to just do whatever he wants and get paid a heap.
That is true.
And then we have to know that the age of entitlement's over and stay home and be poor or go to work and you're disgusting and you're making everyone sick.
I'm happy to be poor and healthy. But seriously, do we then? I said this to someone earlier, and I worry about this for a bit, because let's say a player gets tested for coronavirus, and 99.9% they'll be okay, but obviously the right protocols have to be followed. Do we then postpone the season? Because a friend of mine came back and said, well, the way the NRL are trying to push through this is it almost looks like they would quarantine that team and maybe the team they played against the weekend before, but it's to have every other game going and make up that game in 2 or 3 weeks later. I honestly think it's a real possibility. I know all options are up in the air, but I think it's a real possibility that the NRL are going to try their level best, even if some players come down with it, to play as many games as possible and play catch up a bit later. So this season may well end on the first weekend of October. It's just a feeling. It's just the way the NRL are going for mine, is that they're going to push through whatever happens.
See, I think that as soon as a player tests positive, I think that'll be it. That they'll stop the season.
It should be.
And I think that if it's not something that happens at the legal level, I think the government will give them the tap on the shoulder and say, hey, you got to suspend it now. We can't have this. But I could also see a scenario where if that happened and they suspended the NRL, I could see where, and we've got a couple of months before it, where we still see something like the State of Origin go ahead. Because that would, you'd have a captive audience, first of all. The TV ratings are going to be ridiculous. Channel 9 is going to be desperate for content. And I really could see a situation where if you can get 34 players in an environment where they're safe, they're away from anybody that's going to affect them. Look, you could have these guys, somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, in the 2 weeks leading up to a State of Origin game, and then fly them in on private jets to play in front of nobody.
It would be even better if, not better and not funny, because people being sick isn't funny. But imagine if all the really good players did get sick and it was the expendables. It was all these people that were never good enough for State of Origin.
Like 95.
And we're just watching all this bunch of, really ordinary players just try to play.
All of a sudden, Clint Gutherson's pulling on the number 1 Blues jersey. It's like, what the fuck? Now we're down to reserve graders, are we?
But what if?
No bad.
Gutherson's all right, by the way. Mitchell Moses on the other. No, Moses, I think, actually had a very good game the other night. But what if? And I like that idea. It'd be interesting to see the C grade New South Wales and Queensland play. But
cool.
I think. It would obviously be very upsetting, but it would be quite interesting to watch.
Yeah, obviously.
The thing that interests me is that, let's say we get through a couple more weeks and the season is suspended as well. What happens to, firstly, you look at the first big weekend of the year, and that's Anzac Day, when you traditionally get 40,000 to the Dragons Roosters match. Now, obviously, there's a lot more to do with Anzac Day than the football matches that are played in Sydney and Melbourne, but that might have to be called off. At this stage, I'd be very surprised if that goes ahead, but we are sort of 6 or 7 weeks away from that. We may well be in a scenario here, in a very unique scenario, that in 2 months' time, yes, of course, whoever has won the games that have been played before the season probably gets postponed. Obviously, keep the points. That's fine. We may be in a unique scenario here where State of Origin effectively starts our season again, and you kind of have to take the silver linings out of this whole horrible situation. And if that is the case, it's a hell of a way to kickstart a season.
Yeah, and I think all of those scenarios are possible. That's the weird thing about this. I could totally see where we had no NRL season, but we had like a 5-game State of Origin series, just to get something on TV, just to get some TV revenue that was there. I think that everything is open right now. I could see where we have the competition broken into, very small groups where they play, they might play like the 4 teams, and the top teams from the groups all go in, and they're the playoff teams. Like, I think every scenario is open if it continues for a certain point,
My scenario is the best. I just thought of this right now.
Okay, tell.
If they go into quarantine, they get the captains from every team and they have to play each other on PlayStation 4 on the NRL game. And that's how the season's played.
I like that. I think that's good.
I'd watch it.
That's how they play out the season, and they broadcast it on TV like those competitions.
I know we've been almost going in out. I think that's a very good idea. At least people would watch because they've got nothing else to watch.
Yeah.
I know we're almost an hour into this. I don't know how long do your podcasts usually go for?
As long as we fucking want, Daniel.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Daniel, you've got places to be.
No, not at the moment. The question I have is that worst case scenario, the season gets cancelled. I hope that doesn't happen, but a lot of doomsday people are thinking it will. I don't think it will, but we'll see what happens. How does that affect the game in the long run? Yeah, we may play Origin, so that generates some money. And we may still have the Kangaroo Tour, which will generate some interest. But the fact that Kangaroo Tour is in November, it's kind of outside of where people are really interested in rugby league. How does that leave things place? And again, like the TV money, I know what you were saying earlier, and you would hope TV would understand this is not a normal situation. But say we get to June or July, and God help us for so many other more important reasons that we're not still in the same situation as we are now. But what happens to the game? Because you have played one game. Potentially we may get through another few rounds, and that's it for the season. Clubs lose a hell of a lot of money. The NRL may lose some money from the TV rights. And the thing is, you got to look into the future. We're only a couple of years away from the next TV rights deal, which is another interesting thing that's going to be talked about with or without NRL this year as it builds up to that. The NRL and the AFL to a certain extent, but the NRL is going to take a huge hit if the NRL gets totally cancelled this year. Worst case scenario.
See, I think the worst case scenario for rugby league. So say the season has to be cancelled and we see no more rugby league from Sunday night onwards, right? I think the worst case scenario for rugby league in Australia, that's what we'll just focus on for now, is that you have the TV networks. Obviously, Channel 9 doesn't have this content anymore. Channel 7 doesn't have their AFL content anymore. I think of the writer's strike in Hollywood that they had about 15 years ago. And when the writers in Hollywood went on strike, and what it did was it made broadcasters in the United States look at ways they could fill that content time in without needing shows to be written by writers. And that's where we've got this explosion of reality TV, because you don't need writers for reality TV. Now, these days you kind of do a little bit, but for the most part, you don't need writers. And what it saw was a lot sitcoms. You don't see very many sitcoms anymore.
No.
They were replaced by necessity at that time. The worst case scenario I could see happening for sports in Australia, and we'll just focus on Australia, is that broadcasters find something to fill in that time, and whatever they use to fill in that time is what they go with going forward. And the need to rely on rugby league is not as big as it has been in the past. The one thing I will say in rugby league's favour is that these days on television, on pay TV and on free-to-air TV, the only things that properly rate are either the one or two reality TV shows that they've already got, like the big ones, like what's that one where they fix up the house and they... The Block, that's right. I was just getting over fucking hearing about The Block every 20 minutes.
Another season of The Block.
Yeah. So, we'll basically have 57 seasons of The Block this year. But I think that apart from that, the things that rate live news events and live sports broadcasts. And I think that's going to be the saving grace of rugby league.
Okay, free to air, I agree. But what about Fox League and Fox Footy? We're more interested in rugby league, where they have for 5 months of the year during the off season, they just have replays of old games where I can't imagine. I do flick on every now and again, but not that often. they will have a whole year, potentially, hopefully not. And look, we'd probably see a scenario, at least for the first few weeks, where games are postponed, where they would probably continue an NRL 360 type show because there will still be news going on. But effectively, they have a whole year in particular weekends where they will have to make up stuff. They'll just have to show old games and they will lose money. And we know as well that Foxtel in itself is not really in a good situation at the moment. So I agree with you. I think free-to-air would be all right because they can just put in replays of any old rubbish as they do over the Christmas period. And on a weekend, on a Thursday and a Friday night, they can fill it with whatever they fill it in summer, whatever. But for Foxtel and Fox League and Fox Footy, the other thing is a lot of people subscribe to Foxtel for the various football seasons and then get rid of it over summer because they can watch the cricket if they're interested in that over on free-to-air. Same goes for the tennis. I think they're going to be in a really, really difficult position. And it's not just that. All the personalities they've signed up to do these shows, what do they do for the next 12 months? That's where my worrying comes in, that free-to-air may play ball. I don't know so much about Foxtel. They potentially would love to play ball, but they themselves might not be able to afford to play ball if they have nothing to show. And I kind of, even though it'd be awful, I kind of get where they'd come from with that.
Yeah, I tend to think, it'd be devastating for Fox Sports and Foxtel in general for the reason just. But I also tend to think that once everything was back on track, the thing of Foxtel might have to cut right back on a lot of things. But the things that if they wanted to stay alive, if they didn't wind up, when rugby league and AFL are back, man, it's will be like pumping blood back into their system. So, me and Katey were talking about this before because I got rid of Foxtel and was just going to go with KO. Now, I haven't seen the games tonight, the rugby league games tonight, because do I sign up for KO now? And if they cancel the games from this round, I'm not paying for KO going forward so that they show me replays of rugby league games from 10 years ago. I'm just not willing to do that. So it's a very weird situation. And then in that sense, they've lost my money already just on the uncertainty of what we've got coming up, It's a weird one. Like, Katey, would you get rid of Foxtel completely if the rugby league season was cancelled?
I'm trying to get rid of Foxtel now. It's in my husband's name, and I've been asking him for like 6 weeks to shut it off. I haven't watched it since the season ended.
What's his show though? If he
doesn't use it, we don't use Foxtel. We use my sister's Netflix.
Yeah.
And we just got KO, and I said, well, we've got KO. There's no need to have Foxtel because we aren't going to turn it back on for the season now. And it's just because he doesn't want to ring up and do it.
By the way, can we just get your sister's Netflix password while we're talking?
No, she'll kill me. I have another friend too that I'm using something else of hers. I'm like, why would I pay for it when I can use theirs?
I've heard that they're going to stop that, and I don't know how they would stop multiple people using the one account. But I've heard that Netflix, that's the next thing they'll do basically is stop that sort of sharing going on, which it'll be interesting to see how that affects their numbers. But
which is pretty dumb considering they getting their money either way.
Yeah, that's true. But would you know if you weren't sharing it?
Mm-hmm.
Would you
I get it?
Yeah.
I might. Probably.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pay for it if I don't have to. Yeah. But it's like I can't. If someone walks into my shop and buys a pie, I can't tell them they're not allowed to share with their friend.
That's a good point. Although
once you pay for it, it's yours. You do with what you want.
And they give you that option, so you should be able to.
Yeah, that's true. I tell you what, any friend that wanted to share a pie, if I brought a pie from your shop and they wanted to share it with me, they wouldn't be my friend for very long. That's bullshit.
I wouldn't be sharing anything at the moment.
Yeah, that's a good point. Oh, shit. Well, we've been going for an hour and 8 minutes. I reckon we should probably wrap it up there. any last thoughts? So go to you first, Daniel. Like, any last thoughts on what you've seen and what you expect to happen, and and the crushing, defeat you obviously felt tonight.
To be honest, I must say, in terms of the defeat of the Roosters, it's nice to talk about the game for a second. Look, I was actually impressed with Penrith. I thought the way they came back was good. The worrying thing for Penrith is that they did this a lot last year where they came back and it worked for a period of time, but it's not sustainable to do it every week in, week out, depending on obviously what happens with the season. The Roosters, not overly concerned. The one thing that kind of did worry me, and I'm not having a go at him, because I think the one thing I think you got to remember with the Roosters, they were in England 2 weeks ago, so there would be, and they've had no real preseason. Luke Keary and the Kyle Flanagan combination. Luke Keary is a great player. I think Flanagan is the making of a great player. I think a lot of fans, Roosters, are not probably expected that to click straight away. That is going to take some time. But in saying that, go back 2 years when Cooper Cronk and James Tedesco joined the club. I remember the first 2 months of the season, everyone was writing them off because it just did not click, and then all of a sudden it did. So in terms of the context of the season, if we don't have any interruptions, which looks unlikely, I think the Roosters are all right. I think Penrith are top 8. Certainty as well, to be honest, if they keep playing the way they're doing. In terms of the context of the season, I don't know. I think the press conference that's going to be held is going to be interesting. I tend to think, and I don't know, there are rumours on Twitter that the season's going to be postponed, but from everyone in the know, and having spoken to a couple of people in the media that will go unnamed, they're presuming that the season will go ahead, albeit in a remote venue, so to speak, not offending anyone in Townsville or Darwin, but it will be different. Personally, I think the season will be postponed at some point. I don't know if that will be this week. The problem that we've got now, and this is a problem that we're going to face for a little while, is that this story can change very quickly. So what is said in the next 24 hours can be completely different to what is said in the next 24 hours, and so on and so forth. I would hope we can get through another couple of rounds, but most importantly, two things, is that the players and the fans, but especially the players, their welfare is first and foremost. They have to be okay. They have to be looked after, and their families as well. But obviously, the players are probably fit enough to get through if they have this illness. But some of them will have elderly parents, some of them will have grandmothers, kids, and so on and so forth. And I don't know the personal history of every player, so we've got to be careful of that.
How dare you?
That's what I'll be doing over the time it's postponed, looking up everyone's Facebook account. The second thing, though, is there are so many more important things going on in this world, but it's important that we protect our game. I've seen people on Twitter, we've discussed it in this podcast, that a lot of people are thinking this season should be postponed now. I get that. A lot of people are angry that they can't go to games. I get that as well. But at the end of the day, we've got to put a product out for TV where we get a lot of our money, regardless of whether the TV would play ball or not. And I think you've got to support the NRL. I think every fan, I don't care what club you support, and I think every CEO of any NRL club, and obviously the people working the NRL, they have to unite for this. I know there's been doubt about Todd Greenberg's future. That has to go into the background for the next couple of months. We have to unite as one on this, as everyone else is doing in terms of the world, and see how we go. Try something radical. Try and take them up to Darwin. It may not work, but if we can still see some football for the next few weeks and keep people entertained. This is the other thing. There's going to be a lot of people that aren't leaving the house at the moment and want a product of football to watch. We need that. And one thing, I'll leave you on this, one thing that hasn't been muted much, there's been a few people saying on Twitter about both various codes, is that if crowds aren't allowed into the game, which looks likely, and if they're playing games in one or two venues, a lot of people are saying, and I'm sort of for this, all games should be on free-to-air, because if you were denied a chance to go and watch your team, rightly so, I understand why, you should be able to watch it on free-to-air, because the problem is, if it's not all on free-to-air, everyone's just going to go to the pub to watch it, and it's just going to cause another issue. But most and foremost, everyone just needs to stay safe. We need to be sensible. We need to be rational. And I think people just need to be patient. This will pass, but this is unprecedented circumstances. We just have to wait and watch and see what happens over the next 24, 48, 72 hours.
Well said. Katey, your final thoughts? And also, Parramatta's win.
Oh.
Yeah.
You know what? it really annoys me because I said that people, you say something about a player on their team and they're like, rah, rah, rah. And you're like, I put shit on my own team. Parramatta won, but it was shit.
Yeah, they weren't that
They should have
impressed.
done better.
I thought the Dogs were impressive when you consider where they're at in the rebuilding of the club.
I think they played harder and better than Eels.
Mm.
And it's like, well, yeah, I'll put shit on your player. I'll put shit on my own team. I'll put shit on whatever I want, dickhead.
So what are your thoughts on just generally the overall, situation we're in and what you think?
Well, I think, as Daniel said before, he'd rather stay home and be healthy. Mm-hmm. This is just a grander scale than people in the community. They want to take their kids out of school to keep them healthy. They want to stay home from work to keep themselves healthy. They want sick people to stay home so they don't pass it on. But they don't want to miss out.
Yeah.
And it's like, they're people. They're people who don't want to go to work and get sick, just like you.
Yeah.
So just get your shit together and realize people are more important than things.
And just really quickly, I think also, let's say this idea to go to Darwin or wherever it comes off and it goes, I also think it really should be up to the individual players whether they want to do that. Now, I know that may take some of our superstars out of our game, but a lot of our superstars have wives and kids as well. It is a very delicate situation we're at the moment, and I would not have a go at anyone for pulling out. Whether I agree with them or not, whether I think some of this is maybe an overreaction, at the end of the day, safety has to be number one. So if someone wants to pull out and say they don't want to go, I understand that. It's just going to be a very interesting 24-hour, couple of weeks, really.
I think if superstars pull out, it just gives people opportunities who might not have been able to be superstars to show how good they are. So we might see things that we've never seen because we weren't looking.
Yeah, that's right.
I personally, I've got a big thing where I just, pulling out is not an option, okay? There's no pulling out. But in this case...
I'm surprised you don't have a heap of kids.
In this case, I agree. I think that it needs to be put up to the individual. And we've seen when that happens in rugby league, the individuals tend to be a group and the group tends to be the club and the club tends to be led by the coaches. So, but I think that we're going to play a few more weeks, then the competition will be suspended. The thing I want to say is rugby league has a very, very long history of putting on a show for the people when times are tough and when there are events in the world that are happening. Rugby league has basically been one of the sports that said, look, we'll give you something that you can watch while something terrible is going on. I think that they'll continue that as long as possible. And, I think people need to be prepared for this season to be almost a lost season, but at the same time, there'll be a lot of weird things happening. And I think we could see all sorts of different games and maybe rep games and, events and things like that behind closed doors, but that rugby league will put on. It's going to be a difficult time for the game, but the game is a relief from the difficult times that we're seeing happening around the world. And I think that if we get, one extra game of rugby league, it's a wonderful bonus. I just hope that as a society and the societies that we have across the world, that we get this thing under control, we slow it down, and we get on top of it early on as much as we can, because we've never in our lifetime seen anything like this. And, hopefully we can knock it on the head before it gets too much worse. So, So anyway, thank you both for joining me. I'm sure in the next episode, Andrew will be back with us and I'll have a chat with Andrew and we'll be talking about all sorts of things. We're not going to stop the podcast. I've got a heap of ideas for the podcast. And I know Andrew has a heap of ideas. Yeah. We've got history episodes. There's probably going to be some sort of like, I know that we'll have Daniel back on, Katey will be back on. We've got heaps of stuff lined up, so we're not going anywhere. We're going to provide everyone with the show. We'll probably do a few more of the watching movies and stuff if the season gets cancelled altogether. But we can guarantee Fergo and the Freak is not going anywhere. So if you've got friends, you got family and stuff, and they're like, man, what'll I do without my footy fix? Tell them to subscribe to the podcast. Tell them to go to rugbyleagueproject.org. Tell them to go to the Patreon. What's the Patreon? That's patreon.com/RL Project. Tell us your Twitter accounts too, because they can follow you both on Twitter. Katey, what's your Twitter account?
I don't know. I'll have to go in and check.
I don't know. It ain't that, man.
What's
your Twitter account, Daniel?
Yeah, it's it's at Dan Pettigrew 1. And while Katey is doing that, I do have a question. Let's say the season is cancelled. What the hell are you going to do to occupy yourself for the next 12 months?
Touch himself.
Probably, that's very true.
First of all, Katey, how dare you? Okay? First of all, that's up to me to tell Daniel. Okay, number one. Daniel, I'm just going to touch myself. No, my plan
That'll
would be...
kill 1 minute.
He's going to do that anyway.
Hey, what the fuck? I'm the host here. Don't fucking bag my 1 minute. It's a bloody good minute, all right?
Multiple times a day, you can get to,
That's the best 60 seconds of a young lady's life. No, I would... that's a really good question, because I don't know. I really don't. I think I would probably do a lot of working out. And outside of that, it's probably going to be like Destiny and Fortnite and the Xbox.
videos.
Just try not to get too depressed. Is basically, I think what I will be doing.
I am going to have the most ripped right forearm and wrist you've ever seen. So just be prepared for that. All right.
2021.
Yeah, 2021. It's going to be crazy. So yeah, what's your Twitter account, Katey?
Oh, I forgot to look.
Is it like Katey Lou Burns or something?
Yes, it is. How do you know that?
Because I've seen you on Twitter.
See, this is the weird shit that happens when you get somebody on who fucking is an actual host. And not, me. Actually, no, I'm the host of the halftime show on SWR Sports.
Hey, you know what you could do? You could practice for however many weeks, months, years this goes for, hopefully weeks. For, the way you've hosted this, I reckon you're almost ready to host an episode of SWR League when the rest of the team is in quarantine.
I'm going to tell...
You're going to raspberry it.
Yeah. Look, I'm going to tell every single member of the SWR Sports team that you said that.
Please do. They'll be listening.
Yeah, it'll be good. It'd be silly for me to not ask this question.
Okay.
Of you both, what is the weirdest animals you would eat when the pandemic is at its worst?
This is what caused all this problem.
Yes.
Jesus.
Not bats. Won't be eating bats.
No. Okay, so no bats, right? What about the minor birds? Would we eat minor birds?
No.
I think they taste terrible. What about, are we looking at like, do you reckon you could eat I wonder what a cockatoo tastes like.
I have a deep freezer full of food, so I'm not eating anything wild.
This was a topic on England radio, not what animal would you eat, but what personality, whether you know or you don't know, you would eat. Now, obviously, it has different ramifications, but is there someone you would like to eat to keep you alive?
Yeah, you go first, Katey.
Yes. Not because I think that they taste good, just because I wouldn't miss them if they were gone.
Oh, jeez.
What?
I'm just trying to think of who I would eat if it was a personality and it was to sustain me.
Well, it doesn't really matter who you cook them, and they're all going to taste the same.
No, because I would want somebody that, first of all, I'd want the meat to be tender, so they couldn't be somebody that's exercised. I'd want it to have good marbling because I'd want it to taste good, So, this is going down a bad track. I'm getting myself in trouble.
It's not going to taste good, really.
I've got a few people in mind, but none of them are going to be mentioned.
Okay.
Oh, well, that's a bit. How you going?
You set us up for that, Daniel.
I did. No, it's just interesting. Hopefully it doesn't come to that stage, I must say.
I don't know. I kind of think it'd be interesting.
I would sell my sister-in-law for like one roll of toilet paper, one square of toilet paper.
Jesus. By the way,
shoot it to the moon.
oh, jeez. Well, Katey, if you've got a stack of food in your freezer, I might be doing a trip your way. I obviously I'm not stopping. Like, you're gonna have to just chuck it in my car window when I drive past. But I'm just letting you know that.
No way. I'm not sure. You know what? My nana actually got 3 rolls of toilet paper from me, and I thought that was really nice of me, considering everyone else is like trying to kill each other for them.
Yeah, that was nice. So he's both stocked up.
Sorry?
He's both stocked up.
Me?
You go first, Katey.
No, you go first.
I have me and my girlfriend also, to an extent, we've got enough for a couple of weeks. I tend to think, though, I actually feel very sorry for people who work at Coles and Woolworths who overnight have to restock everything for the crowds getting in at 6 or 7 a.m. in the morning. It is just ridiculous. I did see a tweet on Twitter earlier that said there really should be separate shopping hours for the elderly. And I kind of get that because they're the ones who need all of these things. I want to say one other thing, but I'll let Katey tell us if she stocked up first.
Nah, I bought like 40 rolls of Clean Air Cottonelle a few weeks ago. So, again, preemptive. No member tickets, toilet paper for days. I knew it was coming.
So
Good thinking.
I think Daniel knows more so what I'm like, as being a paranoid, looking to the future and all that stuff. I'm stocked up. I am.
Good thinking. Good man.
The bunker is just prepared.
You're like Branch from movie Trolls.
Yeah, I'm like, if things get real bad, I'm going to bring the cult in. Like, and I've been setting up this cult idea for a while. It's always been where I've probably been going with my life. And yeah, it's going to be a bloody good cult. I can't wait. I'm going to have 25
Does it have to be in Blue Mountains, though?
Yeah, but the thing about...
Oh, yes, I saw this tweet.
Okay, so the idea is it's going to be in the Blue Mountains, right? And the reason for that is because we'll clear all of the hippie idiots that live in the mountains, because they're all a bunch of... If you've been in the Blue Mountains, you know that the people that live up there, they burn incense and it's just a bunch of hippie idiots, okay? So we'll clear them out. That's not a problem. And yeah, then we're going to live up there. I'm going to have 25 wives because it's a cult. Why else would you start one?
Can I, without sounding really bad, really, you want 25 wives?
Yeah.
One's a pain in the ass, let me tell you.
I wasn't going to say that, but
I know because I am one.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, I want one for every day of the new month.
Every hour.
Shoot. No, the new month. It's going to be new months I set up. They're going to be 25-day months. And yeah, we're gonna sustain ourselves off of the land and drink Kool-Aid and stuff. It'll be really good.
That sounds fantastic. Can I just say one more thing? I think, I don't know if I might have posted this Twitter. I think, obviously, we've got off track the past 10 minutes, but I do think it's important that people, this is obviously a very serious situation, and we're having a joke, and I love your idea of 25 wives. I think you're mad. But if you want to do that, you can. Well, you can't actually, it's illegal. But in your world, who knows?
My laws.
Your laws, Lee Craig's laws. Look, I do think it's important that people still have a laugh. And I know there are people that are making jokes about coronavirus, and I know people frown on that. But I think it's important people keep their sense of humour. And instead of, obviously, you have to keep an eye on this, and obviously it is worrying for everyone. But if you lose your sense of humour, you lose everything. So I applaud all these TV shows, and I don't think we're that funny, but I applaud people that actually are funny, that are still going on with stuff, even if it's not actually, or even if it's just on TV or radio. I think as much as we can, we've got to continue our normal lives, have a laugh, enjoy life. We'll get through it, but just stay calm, because stressing about this situation is probably going to make you sick. So I think it's very important for people just to keep their sense of humour. It will all be all right. We just have to be patient.
That's very well said. I don't think I
Thank you.
could have said it better myself.
Thank you. Now, who's your number one wife?
It'd be Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah, I could live with that.
God, be realistic.
No, I would like him to not tonight, but write a list of 25 females that he would have.
Are you kidding?
Why not?
I can't do that because people already say I'm a bloody misogynist anyway.
You
And
want
I'm
me
not
to do
going
it with the NRL players, and you do it with movie stars.
Movie stars.
Yeah, movie star women.
Nah, because like my list would be very like, you know, after you've done what?
Well,
5
do you do it with female NRL stars?
No, I can't do that.
But if I do it with guys, you do it with girls, then it cancels each other out because we're both doing it. So no one's been objectified because it's just everyone involved.
That's a good point. I just feel like I can't do that. I feel like I'd get in so much trouble if I did that, hey?
You probably would.
You agree with me.
There's a tumbleweed.
Yes.
I'm staying out of this conversation.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's been a good end to the podcast.
Oh, I think so.
I'm terrified of saying something wrong, and you're trying to get me to say something wrong. That's fantastic. This is basically, you have now evolved into what Andrew tries to do every episode. He tries to goad me into saying something I shouldn't.
Also, how much am I getting paid for this?
The way that we do it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we send you a check. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now we ask that you don't cash it for the next 2, 3, 4
millenniums.
5 years. Okay.
Oh, years. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. It'll be signed by an A. Ferguson. It won't look like his handwriting, but I can just trust me, it's his. All right.
So it's worth me on Monday or Tuesday going to check the mail and head to the local bank. Yeah,
just go to the bank, rock on up, and just say, look, I just want to put this check in, but don't cash it straight away. Okay.
Cool. I'll let you know how that goes. I'm looking forward to being a millionaire by Tuesday.
Excellent. So am I. Well, thank you everyone for listening in. We'll be pumping out more episodes. We hope you enjoyed this one. We hope that you enjoyed having a bit of a smile and a laugh with us. And we will be back sometime in the next few days.